Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm an English teacher and a slow reader. And almost 2 months ago, me and my partner moved into a new apartment, and this meant a project of having new bookshelves and arranging them in a different way. So, without a further ado, this is my bookshelf tour of 2023. The shelves are from Jysk, which I think is an international store. So, if you like these shelves, you can find them there. Okay, let's get into it. This is the first shelf, and this has my favorite books in them. This has family stories, some historical fiction, and then contemporary, and contemporary continues to the second shelf. But let's go through this one first. A Place for Us by Fatima Farhim Mirza. This is my favorite book. It's about an Indian Muslim family in America and what their lives are like, especially if some individuals don't fit in with the family. Beautiful story. Then I have Pachinko by Minjin Lee. I love this book. I read it over the summer. It's about Korean people living in Japan through history. Then we are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Sayan. Transcend Kingdom by Yagyasi. I read this last year. It's about Gifty and about her family and how she views her family and so on. Very quick overview. The Vanishing Half by Brett Bennett, an excellent book that was quite popular for the past. That has been quite popular for past few years. Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. I read this in a day. Well, very nicely written. Well written. Focuses a lot on trauma, so it was also quite heavy. Two versions of 1,000 Splendid Suns. I've only read it in Finnish, but this book by Khaled Hosseini is beautiful. The Kite Runner in Finnish by Khaled Hosseini. It hurt me deeply in my soul. It was so beautiful. The Shadow King by Marta Mengiste in Finnish. I thought this was an interesting idea, but I feel like since it's about Italo-Ethiopian war, it shows both sides of the war, and I didn't really care for the Italian side of the war, to be honest. Babel by R.F. Kuang. Love this book. Two books by a Finnish author by Catherine the Great. The Book Thief by Markus Zusak in Finnish. I would love to have and read the English copy as well. This is a quite new addition to my library that I that I haven't read yet. It's Toni Morrison's Paradise. I think it's also Paradise in English. And I picked it up from a recycling shelf from a library. And I was like, well, it's Toni Morrison. Of course I want to have her book. This is a recent addition as well. This was on discount at a local bookstore. It's a historical novel. I haven't read it yet. Another favorite book of mine, Susan Abulava, Against the Loveless World. This focuses on the story of Nar, who is a Palestinian but has lived in Kuwait and Jordan, kind of her journey. And I have a whole video where I talk about this book if you're interested. The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I read this earlier in the year and I absolutely loved it. It tells the story of Nina, who has some powers that she can't quite control yet, and she's quite different from the society and the beautiful ones. I really like this one, But then I tried to read another Silvia Moreno Garcia book. I don't remember the name of it, but it was way too much for me. It was very gothic, and gothic writing is really not for me, but I love the beautiful ones. So that's the first shelf. Okay, so contemporary books continue here. The Book of Gaza. So this is a collection of short stories which are all like located in Gaza. I read this quite a few years ago and I remember really liking it. As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Khattu is one of my top reads of the year. This focuses on Salama, who is a pharmacy student but then has to work at the hospital as a medical professional in Syria during the war. And it's really beautifully written, and even though I've said on my channel that I don't really gravitate towards YA anymore, this was exceptional in my opinion, and it was a beautifully written story. And I learned that the author also is a fan of BTS like myself, so that's always an added bonus. Then here is Kimchi Young, born 1982 by Jeonam Joo. I have talked about this book on my channel before. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, Rebecca F. Kuang. Yeah, it was easy to read, it was entertaining, not many thoughts on it. Now this is my Mythology collection. The Goddess of Buttercups and Daisies by Martin Miller. I've had this for a long time, I really enjoyed it. This is another recycling shelf find from a library. I don't know what this book is about. It says Tampuras Kreikkalainen, Tampuras the Greek. I don't know what the story is about, but I was like, hey, a Greek mythology book for free. Let me grab that. Then Jennifer Saint's book, Ariadne. I really love this book and I made a whole video on it. Electra, I didn't really care for this one. And Atalanta, I still haven't read it. The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker was a really heavy read, so that's why I haven't read The Women of Troy yet. I should. Stephen Fry's Mythos is a good introduction to Greek mythology. I read Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel after seeing so much praise for it online. I read it this year, and basically it tells the story of Kaikeyi, who becomes a queen after marrying a powerful leader king, and it was amazingly written. It was definitely, I felt like I was reading an epic while I read this. Another top favorite of this year. This is like a retelling of Ramayana mythology story. This is The Man Who Spoke Snakish by Andrus Kivirak. I went to Estonia for my birthday beginning of this year, and I was really impressed by Tallinn. I really loved the culture and the way they appreciate like their own identity and so on. So I was interested about Estonian writers, and this was a first one on a list of Estonian books that are translated into English and which are the best ones and so on. This is about a boy who lives in a forest, but the people in the forest are slowly moving to the city and like kind of losing their skills of speaking Snakish and hunting and so on. This is based on like medieval Estonia, and it's a mythological, fantastical story. It's not really what I would go for normally, and at times I felt very, not uncomfortable, but it felt difficult to read on. But at the end of the book I was happy to have finished it and happy to have this story with me. In the back I have Les Miserables by Victor Hugo in Finnish. I would love another edition, but at the same time it's a nostalgic version for me because I bought it when I was 16. Here's a copy of Jungi's painting that came with the BTS album B. And then as you can see, here are all of my Jenny Colgan books. The Little Bookshop on the Seine by Rebecca Racine. I read this during Christmas last year and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was perfect for the time. So basically, Sarah Smith, an American woman, exchanges bookshops with her Parisian friend. Like a really sweet idea. Isabel Allende's book Portrait in Sepia. I recently tried to read it, but then I couldn't get into it. Maybe I'll retry it once again. The Eternal City by Domenica De Rosa. Really like this one. And some books in Finnish. Then Emily Henry. I still haven't seen Happy Place in a Finnish bookstore. And I'm really specific about wanting the same edition as this one as well. This is a new release, new book that I have bought. She Gets the Girl by Rachel Lippincott and Alison Derrick. So this is a coming of age love story of Alex and Molly who start uni, and first the point is for them to get together with different girls, but then they get to know each other better and spend time together. It was a really sweet book, and I realized that I do not read enough books about lesbian, bisexual, sapphic women. So I needed to change that, and I wish to read even more. I do read, but not enough in my opinion. I had a phase of loving Giovanna Fletcher's books when I was like 17. So to represent that, I have this book here. You're the One That I Want. Then I have Stephanie Perkins' Anna and the French Kiss and Isla and the Happily Ever After. Not my favorite books, but like very nice to and easy to read. And then the next two shelves are my youth YA children's book. Astrid Lindgren's Ronja the Roper's Daughter, here in Finnish, Paddington, Peter Pan, and Alice in Wonderland. I used to have these on my classic shelves, but then my classic shelf didn't have any room, so I figured I would move it with my other youth books. I Am the Messenger by Markus Zusak is here. Nice book. I earlier this year made a video discussing if it's still a favorite of mine. It was a favorite for a long time. Then, of course, every time I mention this, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky was one of the first books I ever read in English, so it has a special place in my heart. John Green's Turtles All the Way Down is here because it looked nicer amongst these than... Wait, is this wrong way around? It is! What the fuck? Turtles All the Way Down is here because it looks nicer here than with the rest of his book. I actually really liked this one. I reread it like 2 years ago. The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Really like this one. Then of course I have to mention this. I wrote my master's thesis about Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alir Sáenz. My thesis focused on the character of Ari Mendoza and how he represents himself, love and sexuality in his character, being Mexican and his ethnicity, and then family, how they are all represented in his identity. Then the continuation of it, Aristotle and Dante dive into the waters of the world. I think it's a really nice sequel. Then of course, all of my John Green books, one of them in German, Paper Towns actually. I don't really have strong feelings about these John Green books. I mean, you can go watch my first video ever to hear my thoughts on these books. The video is called Rereading John Green as an Adult. I think out of these, well, Turtles All the Way Down is my favorite John Green book, but out of these, I think Will Grayson is my favorite one. Okay, my youth shelves continue with The Hunger Games, all in Finnish and in English, and then The Chronicles of Narnia in English and in Finnish. I have one like singular copy of The Magician's Nephew in Finnish, and then there's this like guide to the fantasy world of Narnia. I wish I could find a better place for this, honestly, it doesn't really fit the shelf. But yeah, these were my interests as a teenager, as a child. I wasn't really a Harry Potter kid or the Lord of the Rings type. For me, it was The Hunger Games and Narnia. I really want to read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I've only read it in Finnish, and when I've read it at release, which was a long time ago, and especially with the movie coming, I want to read the English version as well. This is my Jane Austen collection. This is all of Jane Austen's books that I have accumulated, Finnish and English versions. Some versions mentioned. Jane Austen Emma. This is a recent addition in my collection because it's a new edition of Emma in Finnish. It's stunning, and my partner and I's goal is to read Emma this year. Let's see what happens. Then this version of Pride and Prejudice in Finnish. It's so beautiful, isn't it? A hardcover, and it's translated by Kersti Juva, a very notable Finnish translator. She also translated The Lord of the Rings into Finnish. So a very notable edition. And I have these editions of Emma and Mansfield Park that I do not like because of the movie covers. But that's what we're dealing with right now. I would love to have hardback covers, versions of them in Finnish. But there aren't any other editions. And I do have Emma here, so yes. Here's my classics shelves. Honestly, not much has changed since my last bookshelf tour. I still haven't read many of these books. I know I suck as a person. However, few notes from here. I really want to read Middlemarch because For the Love of Classics says that this is her favorite book. And it seems like a very interesting story, but I'm just so completely intimidated by this. I have another George Eliot book, The Mill on the Floss, and I still have it, even though I haven't really planned on reading this because the cover is stunning. I read The Great Gatsby earlier this year. I've read Jane Eyre. I haven't read Wuthering Heights yet. Oh my gosh. I shouldn't I? The Woman of Brewster Place, I read this few years ago. I thought it was excellent. Little Women, in a couple of versions of Little Women. This is a recent purchase, I haven't read it yet. Yuko Tsushima's Territory of Light. This tells the story of a mother going through divorce. I haven't read it yet, but it seemed really interesting and I bought it when I was in Helsinki earlier this year. Then we have one of my top books of the year, Tove Jansson summer book. This tells the story of a grandmother and her granddaughter living on the island where they have their summer cottage, the family summer cottage, and just kind of the interactions between them and the focus on nature. Like, it's so beautifully comforting book. Tove Jansson is a Finnish national treasure, and this is a special edition because it marked 50 years since the release of the summer book, so this is a special edition of it. Then some Shakespeare, The Little Prince, and then some Penguin Black classics. And yeah. And this is where my non-fiction shelves begin. And here are some autobiographies and biographies by celebrities, also historical biographies, and then poetry books. Few highlights here. First of all, the BTS autobiography, Beyond the Scene, was amazing. Yeah. It's 500 pages, but I didn't feel like I was reading a long book. There was obviously things I already knew since I'm an avid fan, avid ARMY, but it was still like really interesting to see it written on a paper. Yes, I think they did a really good job with this one. They Called Me a Lioness by Ahed Tamimi with Dina Takruri. Tells the story of Ahed Tamimi, and this is a new book. It was released last year, and I just think it's a really good reflection of a Palestinian teenager's life in Palestine. I read The Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole in Many Lands. This is Mrs. Seacole, Mary Seacole's autobiography. It was okay, but it focused a lot on the technical side of her travels rather than her own feelings. Then my necessary mention of I wrote my bachelor's thesis about Sappho and Sor Juana's poetry, so I of course have their poetry books as well. Okay, then continuing on my non-fiction shelves, I did get rid of a couple of non-fiction books that I had just because of their gorgeous cover. But let's go through these. This is a recent book, Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Apparently this is like a classic when it comes to feminist writing. This was released originally in 1992. I haven't read this yet, but I am actually interested and I promise to read it at some point. This is all about the notable women in philosophy. When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone. This tells about all the female deities that was worshipped before the Abrahamic religions. Very interesting. I really like this one. This is about women in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, I think. At least ancient Greece. Angela Y. Davis. So many times on my channel I've said Angela E. Davis. I don't know why. Angela Y. Davis. Freedom is a Constant Struggle. Hidden Figures. I have my first James Baldwin book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm really interested in reading The Fire next time, and it's a short read as well. I really am interested in more of James Baldwin's writings. Team Judah in Wartime. This is quite an old book about war in Ukraine. This was released, I think, 2015, 2014. I think it showed really interesting perspective of people there. I also have this book, We Are Everywhere, which is basically not a picture book. Picture book is the wrong word, but has the photos of the LGBT community across the USA, like historically, especially focusing on like 70s to 90s. It's a really beautiful book. Then some not new additions to my collections, but new additions to the shelves. My books about Finnish history. So this is the history of Finnish peasants. This is like facts about Finnish history. These are letters of Eino Leino. Eino Leino is one of Finland's most notable poets. What else? Well, I don't think this really belongs here, but this is a book about Italy written by a Finnish reporter. She has lived in Italy and between Italy and Finland for a really long time. So she wrote about what she has learned during that time. And then I have some art books about Frida Kahlo, Claude Monet, Van Gogh, and women who read are dangerous. So basically portraits of women reading. You can then see a giant book about the Romanovs there. I don't think I'll ever read it. It's way too thick, but it's really nice to have it. My partner Joel gave it to me one Christmas because around the time we were watching a lot of documentaries about the Romanovs. But I don't know if I'll ever read the book. Okay, so that's the end of my bookshelf tour 2023. I freaking love my shelves and I love my collection. There are still some books that are tucked away into a cupboard because they don't really fit here. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do you have any of these books? Do you enjoy them? Let me know in the comments below. And I hope I see you in the next one. Bye!